I don't know when my wife stopped being happy for other people. Or if she ever really was. When we met, my life was already complicated. I was still married to my ex-wife. I'm not proud of that. I'm not going to pretend I was the good guy in that part of the story. I wasn't. My current wife and I worked together, and after a work party, one bad decision turned into an affair. It didn't stay a secret for long. My ex found nude photos on my phone, and that was the end of my marriage. That divorce broke her, and it should have. I betrayed someone who trusted me completely. What makes this harder to explain is that my ex never became bitter. She never screamed. She never tried to ruin my life. In fact, she did the opposite. She insisted I remain close to our children. She helped smooth things over with family and friends. She encouraged forgiveness when she didn't owe me any. I married my affair partner a year later. At the time, I thought that meant we were moving forward. I thought love was enough to erase the past. I thought guilt was something that would eventually fade. I was wrong. My children never liked my wife. They tolerated her at best. Over time, I realized why. My daughter once overheard her talking about my ex, about her weight, her age, her looks, about how she was no competition anymore, about how I had traded down and how lucky she was to be younger, hotter, and more desirable. That should have been my first real warning. But I ignored it. For years, things were stable, not perfect, but quiet. My wife never spoke kindly about my ex, but she also didn't interact with her directly. I thought it was just insecurity. Something I had caused, something we could live with. Then my ex got engaged. Not just engaged to a man who was very wealthy. Old money wealthy. Private schools, multiple properties, international travel kind of wealthy. And that's when everything changed. At first, it was small comments. Dismissive ones. It won't last. He probably has a prenup. Men like that always cheat. She laughed when she said these things. But it wasn't real laughter. It was sharp, defensive. Then she started Googling him. Constantly. His name, his net worth, his properties, his businesses, his social media. She talked about him like she knew him personally. Like he was a puzzle she needed to solve. Like my ex didn't deserve the life she was about to step into. I didn't think much of it until my wife stopped sleeping. She became irritable, short-tempered. She cried randomly. She was angry at nothing and everything. She talked about my ex constantly. What she wore, what she posted, how she smiled in photos. She obsessed over how smug she looked. I should have confronted it sooner. I didn't. One afternoon, while she was asleep after yet another sleepless night, I did something I'm not proud of. I checked her phone. I told myself it was concern. That I was worried about her mental state. That's when I saw the messages. Instagram DMs. To my ex-wife's fiancé. At first, they seemed innocent. Introductions. Congratulations on the engagement. Polite, almost friendly. He responded briefly at first. Courteous. Distant. Then the tone changed. Her messages became flirtatious. Compliments. Comments about how impressive he was. About how my ex was lucky. About how she understood men like him better than people thought. Then there was a photo. A nude. I felt physically sick. He never replied to that message. Or any message after it. She continued sending texts for days. More flirtation. More testing. Eventually, silence. Left unseen, I called my ex-wife. She already knew. Her fiancé had shown her everything. They were embarrassed, unsure how to handle it. They decided the best response was no response at all. They blocked my wife on everything. When I confronted my wife, she exploded. She accused me of embarrassing her, of betraying her trust by talking to my ex. She cried. She screamed. She told me I had humiliated her by taking their side. Then she admitted it. She said she never wanted him. She said it was a test. A test to prove she could take him if she wanted. A test to prove to herself that my ex wasn't better. That she hadn't lost. She said my ex was smug, arrogant, that she needed a wake-up call. That marrying a rich man didn't make her special. Then she said something I'll never forget. She said she still believed she could take him if she really tried. That's when I realized this wasn't about love. It wasn't even about jealousy. It was about winning. I asked her how she would feel if the roles were reversed. If I had sent nude photos to someone she felt threatened by. She said it wouldn't be the same, that I didn't understand. She didn't consider it cheating. She said it was a test. That night I didn't sleep. I felt guilty, angry, exhausted. I wondered how long this obsession had been growing. How much of our relationship had been built on comparison instead of connection. I wondered if she had ever truly felt secure with me, or if she had always needed to prove something to someone else. The next morning, I knew something had broken beyond repair. I just didn't know yet how bad it was going to get. I didn't tell her I wanted a divorce right away. I thought maybe this was my punishment. After all, I had cheated once. Maybe this was karma. Maybe I deserved to sit in the discomfort and fix what I had broken years ago. But every conversation made it worse. When I asked her why she did it, she circled back to the same explanation every time. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about attraction. It was about proving something. About not losing. About not being second. She kept saying my ex-wife won too easily. That word stuck with me. Won. As if my first marriage was a competition. As if my ex-wife walking away with dignity, raising our children well, forgiving more than she ever should have, as if all of that was somehow a personal attack. I asked her why she hated my ex so much when my ex had never once blamed her publicly. Never insulted her, never interfered in our life together. She couldn't give me a real answer. She said my ex made her feel small. She said people talked. She said everyone knew my ex was beautiful, and it hurt to hear whispers about me trading down. That's when I realized something deeply unsettling. She wasn't angry at my ex for what happened. She was angry that my ex survived it. That my ex rebuilt her life without bitterness. That she found love again. That she was happy and didn't need revenge to get there. My wife didn't see that as strength. She saw it as an insult. Over the next few days, things deteriorated quickly. She became volatile. One moment she was crying, begging me not to leave, telling me she loved me more than anyone ever could. The next, she was furious, calling me weak, accusing me of choosing my ex over her. She said I had embarrassed her by telling my ex what she'd done. I told her I didn't tell her to shame her. I told her because it involved her fiancé. Because it crossed a line. She said lines were subjective. She said if she truly didn't love me, she would have left years ago, because she could get whoever she wanted. She said that more than once. And each time, it felt less like reassurance and more like a threat. I started noticing things I had ignored for years. How often she compared herself to other women. How deeply she fixated on status. How every disagreement somehow came back to proving her worth. How often she needed validation, not just from me, but from the world. I wondered how long she had felt like she was competing with my ex. I wondered if she ever believed she had truly won me, or if she had always felt like she was standing in someone else's shadow. The hardest part wasn't her anger. It was the way she refused to take responsibility. She didn't apologize. Not once. She said she was sorry I felt hurt. Sorry I misunderstood. Sorry, I made it bigger than it needed to be. She said my ex deserved a wake-up call. She said she never thought it would go this far. But when I asked her if she would do it again, if she still believed she could take him if she wanted to, she didn't deny it. That's when I knew. There was nothing left to repair. I told her we needed to separate. She laughed at first. Then she screamed. Then she cried. Then she raged again. She called me a coward. She said I was abandoning her because things got hard. She said I was choosing the easy woman, the one who never challenged me. She said I owed her my loyalty. I told her loyalty doesn't survive obsession. I told her I couldn't live in a house where another woman's happiness felt like a personal threat. She said I was judging her unfairly. That anyone in her position would feel the same way. But I didn't believe that, because I had seen the alternative. I had seen my ex-wife endure humiliation, betrayal, gossip, and still choose grace. And standing in my living room, listening to my wife scream about winning and losing, I understood the difference. We decided to divorce. There were no dramatic legal battles. No children together. Few shared assets. She would stay in the house temporarily until she found somewhere else to go. Even then, she didn't go quietly. She sent long messages filled with blame. She oscillated between begging me to stay and accusing me of destroying her life. She called me names. She cried until she was hoarse. She told me she hated me. Then she told me she loved me, over and over. I felt numb, guilty, relieved. I questioned myself constantly. I wondered if I had pushed her into this. If my past mistakes had planted the insecurity that grew into obsession. If I had failed her emotionally in ways I couldn't see. But guilt doesn't excuse cruelty. And insecurity doesn't justify crossing boundaries. One night, after another argument, I sat alone and thought about my children. How they had always kept their distance from her. How they trusted my ex completely. How my ex never spoke badly about my wife, even when she had every reason to. I called my ex again, not to complain, not to vent. To apologize. For everything. For the affair, for the damage. For bringing chaos into her life, for underestimating her strength. She didn't yell. She never does. She told me she hoped I found peace. That she was happy now, that she didn't want drama or revenge. That she just wanted stability for herself, for our children, for her future. She told me she never hated my wife. She pitied her. That hurt more than any insult could have. When I hung up, I realized something else. My wife had spent years measuring herself against a woman who wasn't competing, and she lost anyway. By the time the divorce papers were drafted, I was exhausted, emotionally empty. I admitted something to myself that I had avoided for a long time. I wasn't just afraid of being alone. I was afraid of believing I deserved better. I had punished myself by staying in a relationship that mirrored my guilt, a relationship where chaos felt earned, where insecurity felt justified, where love was conditional and constantly tested. I thought suffering was accountability. But it isn't, it's just suffering. The last conversation we had was quiet. She told me I would regret this. She told me no one would ever love me the way she did. She told me my ex would always look down on me. I didn't argue. I just told her I was done. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. When everything finally came out, it didn't happen in a dramatic explosion. There was no screaming, no thrown phones, no cinematic confrontation. It happened quietly, in the most humiliating way possible. I found out because my wife stopped hiding it. She didn't confess. She didn't sit me down. She just assumed I already knew. It started with a notification on her phone that she didn't bother silencing. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't suspicious. I was sitting next to her on the couch while she scrolled, half watching a show neither of us cared about. A message popped up with a name I hadn't seen in years. My ex's name. The same ex she swore she never thought about. The same ex who had recently gotten engaged to a millionaire. She didn't flinch. That's what stuck with me. No panic. No scrambling, just a casual swipe like it was nothing. I asked her why he was messaging her. She sighed. Actually sighed. Like I was inconveniencing her. She said, "It's not what you think." And for a split second, I wanted to believe her. Not because the situation made sense, but because admitting the truth meant admitting how badly I misjudged the person I married. I asked her to show me the messages. She hesitated. Not long, just enough. Then she handed me the phone. I didn't scroll far. I didn't need to. The damage was right there at the top. Flirting that crossed lines. Compliments that weren't innocent, and then the image. I won't describe it in detail, but it was unmistakable. A nude, sent deliberately. No accident, no ambiguity. My hands were shaking, but my voice was calm when I asked her why. She didn't cry, she didn't apologize. She didn't even look ashamed. She said, "I just wanted to see if I still could." That sentence will haunt me for the rest of my life. I asked her what she meant. She said she needed to know whether he'd respond. Whether he'd flirt back. Whether he'd still choose her if he had the chance. She said it wasn't about cheating. It was about reassurance, about closure, about proving something to herself. She actually used the word test, a test she never told me about. A test that involved another man's engagement. A test that humiliated all three of us. I asked her if she would have gone further if he had said yes. She didn't answer immediately. That pause was the answer. She finally said, "I don't think so. Not no. Not never. I don't think so." That's when something in me broke, not loudly, not violently, but permanently. I realized I wasn't standing in front of someone who made a mistake. I was standing in front of someone who believed she was entitled to reassurance at any cost, even if that cost was our marriage. She kept talking, explaining, justifying, saying she felt insecure, saying she compared herself, saying she hated how successful my ex had become, saying it wasn't fair that he won after everything. That word again, won. I realized then that this had nothing to do with love or attraction or even sex. It was about ego, about competition, about needing to feel superior to someone she'd never fully let go of, and I was collateral damage. I asked her if she loved me. She said yes, immediately, too quickly. I asked her why loving me wasn't enough. She didn't have an answer for that. That night, I slept on the couch. Not because I was angry, but because lying next to her felt dishonest. I kept replaying everything in my head, every comment she'd made about my ex. Every joke, every comparison I brushed off. All the signs I didn't want to see because seeing them would have meant confronting the truth earlier. The next morning, she acted like we could fix it. Like this was a rough patch. Like therapy and time would smooth it over. She told me it meant nothing physically happened. She told me she chose me in the end, but that's not how trust works. Trust isn't about what didn't happen. It's about what someone was willing to risk. And she was willing to risk everything to feel desired by someone else. I asked her to imagine the roles reversed. To imagine me secretly messaging an ex, sending a nude, calling it a test. She went quiet. She said it would have destroyed her. That was the moment I knew she understood. And also the moment I knew it was too late. We didn't scream. We didn't throw things. We talked. Calmly. Painfully. Like two people finally admitting something they'd been avoiding for a long time. She asked if I was leaving. I told her I didn't know yet. That was the truth. But deep down, I already knew. Because even if I stayed, I would always wonder. Always question. Always feel like I was competing with ghosts from her past. And I refused to spend the rest of my life proving I was enough to someone who needed external validation to survive. A week later, we separated. She cried then. Really cried. Not when I found out. Not when I confronted her. But when she realized actions have consequences that apologies can't erase. She told me she made the biggest mistake of her life. I believe her. But believing her doesn't mean undoing it. The irony is that my ex never responded the way my wife hoped. He shut it down. Told her he loved his fiancée. Told her to never contact him again. The test failed in every possible way. She didn't feel chosen. She didn't feel validated. She lost the one person who had chosen her without conditions. And I learned something I wish I had learned sooner. Some people don't cheat because they want someone else. They cheat because they want proof they still matter. And if someone needs to hurt you to feel that proof, they were never safe to love in the first place.